Well, hey everybody, thank you for checking in and welcome to another one. You can pay many thousands of pounds for a Zeiss vintage lens, or you can pay about 25 quid. Today we're going to take a deep dive into the world of Zeiss vintage lenses. I'm going to tell you all about them, and I'm going to tell you how much you can expect to pay for one. So buckle up, hold on tight, enjoy the ride, because here we go. Before we get to the lenses themselves, it's important to go through just a little bit of history to know which Zeiss products come from where. So the first thing to say then is that there are, or were during the 60s and 70s, two Zeiss companies, and they both made some of the very best, the finest vintage lenses you can buy. One of these companies is still going strong, of course, and you can buy a Zeiss lens pretty much anywhere in the world, and they put their lenses in all manner of optical instruments and phones and cameras and all sorts of things, so they're still going strong. The other Zeiss company, whose name you'll find on lots and lots of vintage lenses, was Carl Zeiss Jena, and they were based in the old East Germany. So what happened was, after the Second World War, Germany was split into two zones. There was the capitalist West and the communist East, and the Zeiss factory was in Jena, which was in East Germany. So the company found itself in this new area. Well, now the Western Zeiss company wanted to still continue creating lenses and cameras, so they set up a new company in, I think the town was Oberkochen in West Germany, correct me if I'm wrong, and they began, as far as I can guess, more or less from scratch, manufacturing lenses, because all the old designs, all their old patents, all their old designs ended up in East Germany. So they, I think, again correct me if I'm wrong, started out from scratch making lenses. And those are the two Zeiss companies that you'll find. Those are the two names that you'll find on vintage lenses, Zeiss vintage lenses from the 60s and the 70s. Carl Zeiss Jena from the old East Germany, and simply plain old Carl Zeiss from West Germany. And that's how it worked. So several £1,000s to 25 quid. Can it really be true? Yes, it is, and I will prove it. Here's the cheapest Zeiss lens you can buy. There it is. It's sitting on the front of my Praktica MTL5, and this is the Carl Zeiss Jena Tessar lens. And this is a fantastic little lens. This lens costs from around about £25. You really can find it that cheap. Sometimes if you buy it on a broken Praktica body like this one, or a broken camera body of another kind, you can find them even cheaper than that. And this is a great little lens. The Tessar design is inherently sharp. It gives really, really sharp images right from wide open at its maximum aperture, which is f2.8. This is a 50mm lens with an f2.8 maximum aperture. Most of the Tessar design lenses that you will see will have a maximum aperture of no more than f2.8, because it's very difficult apparently to make a Tessar lens that has a maximum aperture faster than 2.8. It can be done, and it has been done, but those lenses tend to be quite expensive, and I can't off the top of my head think of any examples. Please do put some in the comments if you know, but most will be f2.8 like this one. Most of them are on an M42 mount. This is an M42 lens sitting on an M42 camera, so it's a nice easy mount to adapt to mirrorless. Very, very simple. Others you will find in exacta mount. Those tend to be a little cheaper, and again those will adapt very easily to a mirrorless camera, no problem at all. This is a lovely little lens and I've used it quite a bit. I've used it on full frame where it works beautifully, and I've used it on APS-C where it works beautifully also. This is a really, really nice little lens. The Tessar design, by the way, has gone into a huge number of lenses. A huge number of cameras use Tessar design lenses, or did do, certainly back in the day. Most of the Industar lenses are Tessar designs. In fact, even my Rolleiflex f3.5 has a Tessar lens in it as the taking lens. So it's a really widespread popular design, and the reason for that is it's a very, very good design, very efficient design, a very sharp design. It gives lovely background blur, this particular lens. You might think f2.8 isn't going to give you a lot of blur, and you know, it depends on the distance, of course. Now this lens focuses like a lot of CZJ lenses. This one focuses really close. It goes to 35 centimeters. So at that minimum focus distance, which is about that far, you'll get loads and loads of background blur, as much blur as you want. So this lens will even make you a nice portrait at a pinch. It's a lovely little thing. You'll find it from £25 to, I don't know, £50 or thereabouts, but you don't need to pay that. These are cheap lenses. They were cheap when they were new, and they should still be cheap now if you look with patience and perseverance. So that's a £25 Zeiss lens that you can go out and buy today. So there are cheap Zeiss options that you can look at. Okay, another very, very famous, well-known Zeiss lens design is the Biotar formula, and this is one of my personal favorites. I do love Biotar formula lenses, and I've used them a lot. The original Biotars were created by Carl Zeiss in the 1930s. I know that there was a 50mm f2, and that I think was mid-30s sometime, maybe 34 or 35, that lens was released. And then towards the end of that decade, in 1938, Zeiss released a 75mm f1.5 version of the Biotar, and that lens too is much copied, still copied today actually, and we'll come on to that shortly. So if you want an original Zeiss Biotar 75mm f1.5 in good working condition that you can go out and shoot, it will cost probably somewhere between £2,000 and £4,000, somewhere in that region. That's a lot of money for any lens, and it's a huge amount of money for a vintage lens. So that really is one for well-heeled collectors. I believe the 58mm Zeiss f2 that was released in the 30s is a similar amount of money. So both of those lenses, very nice lenses, but both of them really, because of the price, are really only for well-heeled collectors. However, this is an extraordinary lens in either 58mm form or 75mm form. Both of them have been widely copied throughout the years and are still copied today, as I say, and you can buy copies of the 75mm f1.5 from Maya Optic. Those are quite expensive. I can't recall exactly how much they are. I think they're about £800 to £1,000 for a new one of those. I'll put the figure on screen because I may well have remembered it wrongly. There's also the TT Artisan exact copy, 75mm f1.5, that sells for around £250 to £300, and there may well be other copies that I'm not aware of. The reason that lens is copied is because it's fantastic. It does astonishing things with background blur, as does the 58, which we'll come on to in a moment. Both these lenses are swirlers. They give an impression of swirling and movement if you get the distance right in the back of a shot. Some people love it, some people hate it. I really like it, and I think it's fantastic effect. So you can buy copies of both these swirly lenses. The 75mm we've talked about. The 58mm, well, that must be one of the most copied lenses ever, because in the form of the Helios 44, you can buy copies of that today starting from around about £50. Now, some years ago I did use a Biotar lens. It was a silver bodied one, not the one that everybody wants. It's a popular lens, but it's not the most popular of the Biotars. Mine was a 50s lens, 10 aperture blade version in exacta mount. It was a beautiful looking thing, and I went out and shot it. I even took it apart and cleaned it, which was a heck of a thing to do, because it really is a tricky one to get back together, and I only just managed it, and I was very relieved when I did, because it was a really tricky job. But anyhow, I'm going off the track. I shot this original Biotar, and then I shot next to it this 13 blade Helios 44, and I actually thought this lens was better. The Helios, certainly in my test, was a nicer lens than the original cleaned Biotar that I had from the 1950s. So that's food for thought. The Helios copies are easily as good as the originals in my experience, and they might even be just that little bit better. So unless you're a collector, get a Helios, and that will give you the full Biotar experience for not very much cash. Another lens from the 1930s, I think, although it may be the later part of the 20s, but I'm pretty sure it was the 30s, is the Zeiss Sonar. So sometime during the 30s, I will put the exact date on the screen there. Sometime during the 30s, Zeiss released a 50mm f2 lens with the Sonar formula. That's a lovely little optic. Again, a much copied optic, but I'll come on to that shortly. And also a 50mm f1.5 lens, also I think in the Sonar formula. That lens again was copied, but we'll come to that shortly. Now, I'm pretty sure there were also an 85mm f2 Sonar lens from Zeiss at around that time, and possibly even a 135mm f4 lens from Zeiss around that time, because they were copied by later manufacturers. So if you want those lenses from Zeiss, actually originals from Zeiss, say a 50mm f2 or a 50 f1.5, again, those lenses will cost into the thousands, as will the 85 and any longer versions that were made. Original Zeiss lenses from the 30s are very, very expensive. There weren't too many of them made before the war interrupted production, and they're really nice lenses. So scarcity and the fact that they're lovely optics means that they're really in demand by collectors. So if you're a collector and you've got cash to spare, those are two beautiful lenses that you could very well look at adding to your collection. However, for those of us who don't have several thousands of pounds in our back pocket, fear not, because these were copied to within an inch of their lives. After the Second World War, much of the designs, in fact I think all of the Zeiss designs, many of the machine tools, were given to the Soviet forces as war reparations. These were taken back and the designs were put into production. They morphed into the KMZ Jupiter 8, that's a 50mm f2 Sonar copy, and that was made from, gosh, the late 40s, right up until the mid 90s, sometime that had a huge production run. So if you buy one of those little Jupiters, one of my favourite lenses, you're actually shooting an exact copy of a 1930s Zeiss sonar. The Jupiters are coated, the original Zeisses weren't. But the Jupiter 8 is a copy of the Zeiss 50 f2. The Jupiter 3 is a copy of the Zeiss 50 f1.5, and the Jupiter 9 is a copy of the Zeiss 85mm f2. The Jupiter 11, this is a Zeiss design lens, a sonar lens, and this is a beautiful lens. All the Jupiter lenses are really nice. The 8 50 f2, the 3 50 f1.5, the Jupiter 9 85mm f2 is a really lovely portrait lens. It's a lowish contrast lens. It's got lots and lots of lovely soft background blur, and if you use it for video, if you shoot video with it in black and white, it just seems to work. Footage I got reminded me of an old David Lean movie. It just is absolutely, well, it's definitive of the era. It looks exactly like 1930s footage to my eye, and it's a lovely portrait lens as well. It's quite in demand now, actually. So a Jupiter 9 8, that's the 85mm portrait lens, that will cost around about, what, about £200, £150 to £200, something like that. A Jupiter 8 50 f2, that will cost about £50. A Jupiter 3 f1.5, which in my opinion is not as good a lens as the f2, the Jupiter 8, but the Jupiter 3 will cost you around about 150, 200, maybe £250. Those were always fairly expensive. This little Jupiter 11, well, you can get this for about £40, £30 to £40 if you're patient and persistent. It's a beautiful optic and it gives lovely background blur and it's really sharp. Another very beautiful optic from Carl Zeiss Jena, and also a very cheap optic, is the CZJ 135mm f3.5. Now, it is said that you can't make a bad 135, and there's something in that. Most of the 135s I've shot, in fact I think all the 135s I've shot, whether 2.8 or f3.5, have really been nice lenses, and I've not found too much to complain about in any of them. And many of them, even from fairly you know, cheap manufacturers like third-party manufacturers and so on, many of them have been really quite nice. However, the CZJ lens is just that little bit more special. It has an X quality that I can't quite put my finger on, but it probably is nicer than any of the 135s I've shot from any other manufacturer, with the possible exception of Pentax. They did make a beautiful 135 3.5, but the CZJ one, a genuine Zeiss lens, gorgeous colour, plenty of reach. f3.5 is not particularly fast, but that doesn't matter. If we're shooting on digital, you just whack up the ISO to compensate and off you go. It doesn't matter that it's f3.5 in terms of background blur, because as it's a long lens, it's got plenty of reach at 135mm. As a long lens, it inherently makes lots of background blur anyway, so f3.5 is no handicap from that perspective. Gorgeous colour, very sharp and very lovely, very soft blur that's pretty well behaved for most of the time. It does have some character, it's not perfect and bland like a modern lens would be, but it's just lovely vintage background blur with character. And this lens you will find for between £40 to £60, and it's fantastic. You will not find a nicer 135, and it's a genuine Zeiss lens too. Right, what else have we got? Okay, Pancolar and Planar. Right, where's the Planar and Pancolar? I tested these two lenses recently, in fact just a couple of weeks ago, and what we found was that the Pancolar here from Carl Zeiss Jena, for many, many years my gold standard in vintage lenses. Well, actually I found that the Planar was that little bit sharper. So the Planar is a Western lens, it's from the Western Zeiss company, it's a 50 f1.7. The Pancolar is from Carl Zeiss Jena, and that's a 50 1.8. So they're very comparable lenses in that regard. I love the Pancolar for what it can do. It's still, even though the Planar slightly beats it for sharpness, the Pancolar is, I think, still possibly the nicest vintage 50 I've shot. It gives gorgeous colour, it gives very nice, well-behaved, not perfect, no vintage lens background blur is perfect, but the blur from this lens is nice and well behaved, and sometimes it's just lovely. The Planar is really, really sharp, but the background blur isn't so nice. It's actually quite rough, and I was very surprised to see that. It's got plastic parts used in its construction, not necessarily a bad thing, but surprising. And it's got probably just about the worst chromatic aberration performance of any lens I've ever shot. It's just stunningly, staggeringly bad. And how that was not corrected, I don't know. I know it was more difficult to correct optical flaws back in the day before the use of computers, but this is a late lens and there was a lot of experience by this point, and computers were coming in by this point, so that's frankly surprising. I think the Pancolar is the better lens. A Pancolar will cost between 150 for the non-radioactive version and about 250 for the radioactive version. Both give fantastic colours, but I think people go after the radioactive one because, you know, it's said to give nicer colours. I don't think it does, but, you know, there we are. So 150 to 250 for the Pancolar, and what, 140 to 180 for the Planar, maybe 200, something like that. Carl Zeiss Jena also made a series of lenses called Flektogon, and they were beautiful lenses. There are, let me think now, there is a 35mm f2.8. That's really nice, a lovely lens, and it has a really nice close focus distance like most of the Carl Zeiss Jena lenses do. And there's also an f2.4 version of that lens. It's versatile, it can go very close to do things like product shots for eBay, or if you're selling stuff. It can even make a nice portrait. It can get nice and close and make plenty of background blur. It's great for street work. You can just stop it down and do hyperfocal distancing with it, so it's fantastic for street work, and it's great for general photography too. The 35mm is a really useful focal length. So the Flektogon 35mm f2.4 and f2.8 lenses from Carl Zeiss Jena, that's the Eastern company in East Germany, they were just gorgeous. There is also a Flektogon 20mm, which is an astonishing lens. This is from the late 50s. It's a rectilinear, very, very wide angle. It's got a massive big front element, a rectilinear lens, so it keeps straight lines straight, doesn't have any bowing or distortion, barrel distortion, or what's the other one, pincushion distortion, like that way, going the other way, like that way. Doesn't have any of that. There's an f4 version, which I have, and there's an f2.8 version, which I don't have. Just incredible. Certainly for the time, this is an incredible lens. They're sharp lenses. They go very close in the Carl Zeiss Jena tradition. From memory, it's about 30 centimetres. It's sharp, it's got great colour, and it keeps all the straight lines straight. It's not cheap. From memory, I paid £50 for mine because the front element was in a right mess. It looked like it had been sandblasted or something. And there's a video earlier on, maybe a couple of years ago, where I actually grind the front element. It was so bad, the only option was to, if I wanted to make it better in any way, the only option was to grind that front element and make it smooth again. And I did that, and it was much nicer. But I paid 50 quid about 4 years ago for a damaged one, which I later fixed, sort of. If you want a good one, these are expensive. These are, £300 up for the f4 version, around about £500 up for the f2.8 version. These really are very, very nice lenses, and they're very collectible. But if you can manage to get one with a fault, like I did, you can find them cheaper. I mean, look, £200 to £400, £500 to £800, that's plenty of money. But if you don't pay too much in the first place, if the lens is good, and if you take care of it, you will be able to sell it on pretty much for what you paid. Prices are not going down. Prices of vintage lenses are not going down, and while some may vary here and there, generally these things are not going to go down. Why? Because nobody's making any more of them. There's a finite supply, and there's a dwindling supply of lenses in good condition ready to shoot, so prices will only go one way. So you really can't lose out. Although the prices are going up, you can't really lose out if you buy one and don't like it, because you'll almost certainly be able to sell it on for pretty much what you paid. So there we are. You really can pay between 25 quid and several thousands of pounds for Zeiss lenses. Lenses with one of the most famous optical names in the world on the front, and with optical performance to back them up. All of them really nice lenses, all of them fantastic quality. Some of them very cheap, like this little Tessar. Some of them really, really expensive, like an original Biotar 75mm f1.5. So the whole range and the whole gamut is there for you to go at. All of them are lovely. All of them will make you fantastic images, and if you don't like them, if you haven't paid too much in the first place, you'll be able to sell any and all of them on for pretty much what you paid. So that can't be a bad thing. So there we are. I guess that's about it from me for this week. Many, many thanks for watching, and particular thanks, if you've got this far, particular thanks to you. I'd like to thank subscribers for your support. That is genuinely appreciated, and if you've liked and enjoyed this episode, why not chuck us a sub and hit the like button as well. That would be really appreciated. Many, many thanks go to patrons for your support. I could not make this show in the way that I do if it wasn't for that support, so many, many thanks for that. If you've enjoyed this show and you think this channel's doing a reasonable job of keeping the old gear alive and kicking, you might want to become a patron yourself. You can do that for as little as $1 per month, and you can do that over at www.patreon.com/Zenography. As for me, I guess that is it for now. So many thanks for watching, and if you're not doing anything too troublesome, truculent or awkward next week at around this time, please do tune in and join me for a spot more Zenography. Cheerio all.